Imagine a dimly lit room in the basement of a massive brutalist building. The air is thick with dust and the smell of old paper. A man in a grey suit sits at a desk staring at a ledger. He's not a general, he's not a diplomat, he is an accountant. His finger traces a line of red ink that runs down the page like a jagged scar. 1914, 1939, 1971, 2026. The numbers in the column are growing exponentially, defying gravity, defying logic. The debt has become a mathematical singularity. It is a black hole that is swallowing the entire economy. The accountant closes the heavy book. He knows there is no way to pay this back. The taxes of 1,000 generations would not be enough. He picks up a secure red phone. He does not call the Federal Reserve, he calls the Pentagon, and in that moment, a gear turns deep inside the machine of history. A missile silo opens in the desert. A carrier strike group changes course. The solution to the debt crisis has been found. It is not austerity. It is not default. It is war. Most people believe that wars are fought for ideology. They are fought for freedom, for democracy, for territory, or because some dictator woke up on the wrong side of the bed. This is the fairy tale they teach you in school to keep you patriotic and obedient. It is a lie. The brutal, cold truth is that modern wars are almost always financial events. They are foreclosure proceedings executed with cruise missiles. They are bankruptcy reorganizations disguised as national emergencies. When a sovereign empire accumulates so much debt that the interest payments begin to consume its ability to function, it has only two choices. It can declare bankruptcy and collapse internally, destroying its elite. Or it can find an external enemy, start a massive conflict, and use the fog of war to erase its liabilities. Before we dig deeper into this graveyard, you need to understand the danger of the information you are about to hear. The algorithm hates this topic. It triggers every suppression filter in the system because it unmasks the true nature of power. If you want to stay ahead of the narrative, you need to help this signal break through the noise. Subscribe to the channel and like this video right now. Do it to tell the machine that you are watching. Leave a comment below a single word, truth, to mark your place in the resistance. Now, let us look at the fire they are preparing to light. Think of the global economy as a giant warehouse. For decades, the managers of this warehouse, the central bankers and politicians, have been stealing from the inventory. They have been printing fake receipts money and selling goods they do not possess. Now, the auditors are coming. The creditors want to see the assets. The people want to know where their pension money went. The managers have a problem. If the audit happens, they go to jail. So what do? Do they confess? No. They burn the warehouse down. They start a fire so massive, so devastating that no one can check the books. And then they blame the fire on an arsonist, a foreign enemy. It wasn't our theft that destroyed your savings, they will say. It was the war. This is what I call a kinetic default. A financial default is when you tell your bank you cannot pay. A kinetic default is when you shoot your banker. We are currently living through the largest debt bubble in the history of the human species. Global debt is over $300 trillion. The United States alone owes $35 trillion. These numbers are just abstractions to you, but to the system, they are cancer. The tumor has grown larger than the host. The interest on US debt is now higher than the entire defense budget. This is the terminal stage, the patient is dying, and the only experimental treatment left is a massive bloodletting. History is a crime scene, and if you know where to look, the fingerprints are everywhere. Look at 1914. The European empires were drowning in debt from colonial expansion and social programs. The gold standard was constraining their ability to print money. Suddenly an archduke is shot in Sarajevo. A convenient spark. World War I begins. The gold standard is suspended. The printing presses run hot. Debts are inflated away. Millions die in the trenches, but the balance sheets are cleansed. Look at 1939. The Great Depression had devastated global economies. Deflation was killing the banking system. Then, the tanks roll into Poland. Suddenly, unemployment vanishes. Factories run 24/7. Massive government spending restarts the heart of the economy. War was the stimulus package that finally worked. We are now standing at the precipice of another 1914 moment. The parallels are terrifyingly exact. We have a declining hegemon, the US, burdened by unpayable debt. We have a rising challenger, China, holding the paper. We have a global financial system that has run out of road. The soft landing narrative is a sedative. They are trying to keep you calm while they position the pieces on the board. They know that the current financial order cannot survive another 5 years of peace. Peace is deflationary. Peace exposes the rot. War is inflationary. War hides the rot under a layer of patriotic fervour and emergency powers. When the war starts, and it will likely start in the Pacific, around 2026 or 2027, it will not be framed as a debt restructuring. CNN and Fox News will not talk about bond yields. They will talk about defending freedom and stopping aggression. They will show you pictures of atrocities. They will manipulate your emotions to make you accept the unacceptable. You will accept rationing. You will accept capital controls. You will accept price caps. And most importantly, you will accept the destruction of your currency's purchasing power, because we all have to sacrifice for the war effort. This is the mechanism of the theft. War gives the government the moral license to steal from you. In peacetime, if the government prints $10 trillion causing 50% inflation, you riot. In wartime, if they print $10 trillion to build tanks and save the country, you cheer. They use your patriotism to pick your pocket. They devalue the currency to pay off their debts with worthless paper. It is the oldest trick in the book. It is financial repression with a flag draped over it. The physiological horror of this strategy is that it treats human lives as liquidity. In the eyes of the ledger, a soldier is just a unit of expense that justifies a unit of debt creation. A destroyed city is an opportunity for a reconstruction loan. The system feeds on destruction. It needs entropy to reset its complexity. We are not citizens to them. We are collateral. And right now, the collateral is being called in. The drums are beating. You can hear them in the speeches of politicians who suddenly sound more hawkish. You can see them in the military budgets that are exploding worldwide. You can feel them in the tension in the air. They are preparing the public mind for conflict. They are manufacturing consent for the great write-off. You need to understand that the coming war is not an accident. It is a policy decision. It is the break glass in case of emergency option for a bankrupt elite. And the glass is already cracking. Let us step away from the emotion of the battlefield and walk into the cold, sterile laboratory of history. Put on your white gloves. We are going to perform an autopsy on the last 100 years of human civilization. When you cut open the timeline, you don't see random chaos. You see a rhythm. You see a pulse. It is the heartbeat of a monster. Thump, thump, accumulation. Thump, thump, destruction. The global economy breathes in debt and breathes out war. This is not poetry. This is mechanics. It is a cycle as predictable as the tides, governed by the iron laws of mathematics and human greed. We are currently living at the very end of a long-term debt cycle. These cycles typically last about 80 to 100 years. They begin with a period of hard money, honest work, and reconstruction. Think of the post-World War II era. The world was broken, but the balance sheets were clean. Debt was low, growth was real. We built highways, we went to the moon, we created the middle class. This was the spring and summer of the cycle. The organism was young and healthy. But success breeds complacency. As the generations pass, we begin to borrow. We borrow to consume. We borrow to speculate. We borrow to fund wars in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. The debt grows faster than the income. The organism starts to age. Arteries harden. The political system becomes corrupt, addicted to the sugar rush of cheap credit. By 2008, the patient had its first heart attack. The global financial crisis. It was a warning. The debt was already too high. The system should have deleveraged. We should have taken the pain, accepted the bankruptcies and cleared the rot. Instead, the doctors, the central bankers did the unthinkable. They injected the patient with pure adrenaline, quantitative easing, 0% interest rates. They printed trillions of dollars to paper over the cracks. They kicked the can down the road. But they didn't just kick the can, they kicked a hand grenade. And now, 17 years later, we have reached the end of the road. The grenade has stopped rolling. The pin is out. The mathematics of the debt are now exponential. The curve has gone vertical. There is no way to grow out of this. There is no way to tax out of this. We are trapped in a burning room with no exits. Look at the charts. They scream the truth that no politician dares to whisper. Every time in history that the debt-to-GDP ratio of a major empire crosses the 130% threshold, one of two things happens. Default or war. There are no exceptions. It is a law of economic physics. In the 1930s, debt peaked. Result, World War II. In the Napoleonic era, debt peaked. Result, the Napoleonic Wars. Today, global debt is over 350% of GDP. We are not just in the red zone, we're off the scale. The pressure in the boiler is so high that the rivets are popping. The only way to release this pressure without destroying the ruling elite is to direct it outward, to find an enemy, to start a fight. This cycle is driven by generational turnover. The generation that remembers the horror of war dies out. The generation that remembers the pain of inflation dies out. We are left with leaders who have never seen a real crisis, who treat the economy like a video game where you can always press restart. But reality has no restart button. Reality has consequences. The fourth turning is upon us. This theory, developed by Strauss and Howe, predicts that every 80 years, society goes through a cataclysmic crisis that reshapes the entire order. We are due. We are overdue. The scariest part of this cycle is the Thucydides trap. When a dominant power, Sparta, Great Britain, the USA, is challenged by a rising power, Athens, Germany, China, war becomes statistically probable. 12 out of 16 times in the last 500 years, this dynamic ended in bloodshed. But add the debt dimension, and the probability jumps to near 100%. Why? Because the declining power is always broke. The US hegemony is built on the dollar, and the dollar is built on debt. China is the creditor. China holds nearly $1 trillion of US treasuries. China produces the real goods that America consumes. In a normal bankruptcy, the creditor China would seize the assets of the debtor America. They would take the land, the technology, the resources. But sovereign states do not go to bankruptcy court. They go to the battlefield. America cannot pay China back. It is mathematically impossible. So the logical sociopathic move for the US is to provoke a conflict. If you are at war with your banker, you don't have to pay your mortgage. You can freeze their assets. You can void the bonds. You can default on the enemy while claiming moral superiority. It is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. This is why the tension over Taiwan is not just about semiconductors or democracy. It is about the ledger. A kinetic war in the Pacific allows the US to wipe hundreds of billions of dollars of liability off its books instantly. It justifies the seizure of Chinese assets in the West. It forces allies to buy US debt to fund the war effort. It is a financial reset button disguised as a naval blockade. And do not think for a second that the other side doesn't know this. China is dumping US debt as fast as it can. They are buying gold. They are building stockpiles of grain and oil. They are preparing for the moment when the dollar system is weaponized against them. They are reading the same history books. They know how the cycle ends. They are hardening their economy for impact. We are watching a slow-motion train wreck that has been in motion for a century. The tracks were laid in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve. The speed increased in 1971 when we left the gold standard, and now the train is derailing. The passengers, you and I, are arguing about politics, about gender, about climate change. We are fighting over seats in the dining car while the locomotive is plummeting off a cliff. The 100-year cycle demands blood. It demands a sacrifice to balance the books. The gods of finance are hungry. They have eaten the savings of the middle class. They have eaten the future of the youth. Now they want the bodies. War is the final stage of financial capitalism when it runs out of growth. It is the moment when the system starts to consume itself to survive. You are living in the most dangerous decade in human history, not because of nuclear weapons, but because of compound interest. The bill has come due, and the only currency left to pay it is the lives of your sons and daughters. Now let us descend into the engine room of the theft. We have established why they need a war. Now we must understand how the war allows them to steal everything you own without ever breaking into your house. The weapon is not a gun. The weapon is the printing press. In peacetime, the creation of money is limited by the public's tolerance for inflation. If the price of milk doubles overnight, people take to the streets, governments fall. But war? War changes the psychology of the herd. War creates a state of exception where the laws of economics are suspended in favor of survival. This is where the concept of financial repression comes into play. It sounds technical, dry, boring. It is actually the most violent financial assault imaginable. Financial repression is a deliberate policy to keep interest rates below the rate of inflation. It is a way of liquefying your savings and transferring that purchasing power directly to the government to pay down its debts. In normal times, you would notice this. You would see your bank account losing value and you would move your money to gold, to foreign currencies, to Bitcoin. You would try to escape. But in wartime, the escape routes are blocked. This is the second part of the trap: capital controls. When the conflict starts, the government will declare that moving money out of the country is aiding the enemy or economic treason. They will lock the doors. You will be trapped in a burning currency. You will watch your life savings evaporate in real time, turning into tanks, drones, and missiles that explode halfway across the world. And if you complain, you are unpatriotic. You are a saboteur. Look at the numbers from World War II. The US government debt exploded, but they didn't default. How? They capped interest rates. They forced banks and pension funds to buy war bonds that paid 2% interest when inflation was running at 10 or 12%. Anyone who held those bonds lost half their wealth in real terms over a decade. It was a patriotic confiscation, a silent tax, and it worked. It liquidated the debt of the Great Depression. They are preparing to do exactly the same thing in 2026. But this time, the scale will be vastly larger because the debt is vastly larger. The mechanism is simple. The Federal Reserve will become the buyer of last resort for the entire US government. They will print quadrillions, not trillions of digital dollars to fund the war machine. This flood of new money will chase a shrinking supply of goods because supply chains will be broken by the war. The result will be hyperinflation, not the 8% CPI lie they feed you today. Real, Weimar-style hyperinflation. 50%, 100%. But they won't call it hyperinflation. They will call it Putin's price hike, or the Xi surcharge, or supply chain disruption. They will blame the enemy for the fact that your dollar buys nothing. War is the ultimate laundering machine. It takes dirty debt created by corruption, waste and incompetence, and washes it in the blood of soldiers, turning it into clean patriotic debt. It allows the elite to reset the board. When the war is over, or when the currency finally collapses, they will launch a new system. A central bank digital currency, a new dollar, and the exchange rate will not be favourable to you. You will trade your worthless old paper for a handful of digital tokens, and your generational wealth will be gone, wiped clean. The ledger will be balanced on your back. Consider the physiological impact of this strategy on the population. High inflation is a constant state of adrenaline and panic. You cannot plan for the future because you don't know if you can afford bread next week. You stop building. You stop dreaming. You exist in survival mode. Society regresses. The trust between neighbours breaks down. Did he hoard food? Does she have gold? Paranoia spreads like a virus. This atomization of society is exactly what the state wants. Scared, hungry, isolated people are easy to control. They look to the government for salvation. They accept the digital ration cards. They accept the surveillance. They accept the new order. The war economy is a command economy. It justifies the nationalization of industries. We need to seize the energy grid for national security. We need to control the food supply to prevent hoarding. It is the back door to total socialism, justified by the exigencies of conflict. The free market dies the moment the first missile is launched. Price controls will be introduced. You will see empty shelves. You will see black markets. You will see the return of the grey man, the smuggler, the only figure who thrives in a repressed economy. And what about the stock market? The wealth stored in your 401,000? In nominal terms, it might go up. The Dow Jones might hit 100,000, but a loaf of bread will cost $500. This is the illusion of the crack-up boom. The numbers go up, but the value goes down. You will feel rich on paper while you starve in reality. This is the cruelest trick of the inflationary weapon. It blinds you to your own poverty until it is too late. The elite know this. They are not holding cash. They are not holding bonds. They are buying farmland. They are buying mines. They are buying real assets that can survive a currency collapse. They are positioning themselves on the other side of the trade. They are shorting the dollar and longing chaos. When you hear a billionaire talk about philanthropy and global stability, watch what his hands are doing. He is building a bunker. He is moving his family to New Zealand. He is liquidating his exposure to the system he helped create. The year 2026 will bring the yield curve control on steroids. The Fed will pin rates at zero while inflation rages. This is the financial equivalent of holding a pillow over the face of the saver until he stops struggling. It is murder. Premeditated, cold-blooded financial murder of the middle class. And the weapon used to distract the victim, to keep him from fighting back, is the war on the television screen. You will be so busy hating the foreign enemy that you won't notice the domestic enemy emptying your pockets. You must understand, inflation is not a side effect of war. Inflation is the purpose of war. The war is the cover story. The inflation is the operation. The goal is to dilute the debt to zero. If they have to burn down the world to do it, they will. They have done it before. They will do it again. The printing press is already warm. The ink is loaded. And the target is you. We have arrived at the edge of the cliff. We have dissected the history, the mathematics, and the mechanism of the theft. Now we must look directly at the trigger. We need to talk about the specific scenario that will likely initiate the kinetic default. It is not a vague someday. It is a concrete series of events with a terrifyingly high probability of occurring around 2026. The theatre is the Pacific. The actors are the United States and China. The prize is not Taiwan. The prize is the survival of the dollar system versus the birth of a new, resource-backed order. Imagine two sumo wrestlers fighting on the edge of a precipice. They are locked in a deadly embrace. One wrestler is the United States bloated with debt, fueled by a printing press that is running out of ink. The other is China, sitting on a mountain of real assets but suffocating under a real estate bubble and demographic collapse. They are dependent on each other. China holds American debt. America buys Chinese goods. It is a suicide pact. If one falls, both fall. The only way to break this embrace without dying is to push the other one off first. The trigger mechanism is financial, not military. It begins with the US Treasury market. Right now, nobody wants to buy long-term US debt. The bond vigilantes are on strike. The auctions are failing. To keep the government funded, the Federal Reserve has to monetize the debt printing money to buy its own bonds. This devalues the dollar. China sees this. They realize that their $800 billion in US treasuries are melting like ice cubes in an oven. They have a choice: hold them to zero or dump them. The moment China decides to aggressively dump US debt, interest rates in America will spike to 10, 12, 15%. The US economy will instantly cardiac arrest. The housing market will vaporize. The banking system will implode. Washington cannot allow this. They cannot allow a foreign adversary to dictate the cost of capital in the United States. This is the red line. This is the moment the accountant in the basement picks up the red phone. The narrative is already written. China is attacking our financial sovereignty. This is economic warfare. To stop the sale of bonds, the US president will sign an executive order freezing Chinese assets. We are sanctioning the aggressor. In retaliation, China blockades Taiwan, the chip foundry of the world. The supply of semiconductors, the oil of the 21st century stops. The global economy seizes up. The stock market crashes 50% in a week. Panic, chaos, and then the kinetic default. The US declares war. Not necessarily a full nuclear exchange that benefits no one, but a limited, high-intensity kinetic conflict. Why? Because war changes the legal status of debt. Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, debts owed to a hostile nation are null and void. In one stroke of a pen, the US cancels nearly $1 trillion of liability. We don't owe money to the people shooting at our ships. It is the ultimate balance sheet trick. It is the jubilee of the damned. Simultaneously, the domestic population is put on a war footing. Capital controls are imposed. You cannot buy gold. You cannot buy Bitcoin. You cannot move money offshore. You are forced to hold dollars that are being printed into oblivion to fund the war. Your savings are the fuel that keeps the tanks moving. You are being harvested. The inflation that follows will be blamed on the Chinese blockade, not on the Federal Reserve's reckless printing. The enemy provides the perfect alibi for the murder of the middle class. This is the endgame. The year 2026 is the likely flashpoint because the math dictates it. The interest payments on the US debt will eclipse all other discretionary spending by then. The system simply cannot function mathematically beyond that horizon without a reset. They need a reason to print $100 trillion. Saving the banks again won't fly, the public will revolt. But saving democracy? Stopping the new Hitler? That sells. That gets the flags waving. So what do? You're standing on the train tracks and the engine is coming. You cannot stop the war. You cannot stop the default. You're not a central banker and you're not a general. But you can step off the tracks. First, you must realize that in a kinetic default, counterparty risk is fatal. Anything that depends on someone else's promise to pay is garbage. Bonds are garbage. Annuities are garbage. Bank deposits are garbage. They are all claims on a system that is about to declare moral bankruptcy. You need assets that have no counterparty risk. Physical gold, physical silver, Bitcoin held in self-custody if you can hide it. Land that produces food, tools, skills. Second, You must become invisible. In a war economy, visibility is death. The tall poppy gets cut. The wealthy are targeted for patriotic levies. Do not flash your wealth. Do not talk about your stack. Grey man theory is your survival Bible. Look poor, be rich. Look compliant, be ungovernable. Third, you must understand that the New World Order that emerges from the ashes will not be global. It will be fragmented. The world is breaking into blocks. The US bloc, the BRICS bloc. You need to decide where you want to be when the Iron Curtain falls again. Do you want to be locked in the declining empire with capital controls, or do you want to have a passport and a foothold in a jurisdiction that respects property rights? Geographic diversification is not a luxury anymore, it is an insurance policy against tyranny. We are witnessing the funeral of the post-1945 order. It was a good run. We had cheap goods, cheap energy, and relative peace. But the credit card is maxed out and the repo man is here. He's wearing camouflage and carrying a rifle. The kinetic default is coming. It is the only way the math resolves. It is the only way the elite survive. They will burn the village to save the castle. Do not be in the village. Do not be the collateral damage in their accounting fraud. Wake up. Look at the horizon. That smoke you see is not a campfire. It is the future burning. The cycle is closing. The guns are being loaded. And the debt will be paid. Not with money, but with fire. This is the prophet of financial apocalypse signing off. The warning has been delivered. The rest is up to you.